The birth of the primordial Greek gods, a tale of chaos and creation. Before Olympus stood tall and before the mighty Zeus claimed dominion over the heavens, there was nothing. No sun, no moon, no gods, no mortals, only the abyss. From that silence came chaos, not confusion, not disorder, but the primordial void, a vast, immeasurable darkness that stretched beyond time and space, a gaping, breathless chasm from which all things would be born. Chaos was the raw pulse of existence before anything existed. It was not just the beginning. It was everything before the beginning. And from chaos, the first divine stirrings emerged. The first to come forth was Eros, not the mischievous boy of later myths, but a force as ancient and powerful as existence itself, the embodiment of love, of attraction, of the invisible bonds that pull energy into form. To the ancient Greeks, love was no simple emotion. It was the primal catalyst, the spark that compelled order from formlessness, life from stillness, and soul from shadow. Then came Tartarus, a being as dark as chaos, but heavier, deeper. He was the abyss within the abyss, the very idea of a prison, a place so far from light that it became its own god. In time he would become the underworld's foundation, but now he was merely the unlit bottom of all things. Next stirred Gaia, Earth herself, but this was no gentle mother. Gaia was power, form, and flesh. She was the first boundary, the first breath of matter. Her body was the world, and from her stillness mountains would rise, seas would swell, and sky would stretch. From chaos, two more beings emerged, Erebus, the god of darkness, and Nyx, the goddess of night. Together they brought the hush of shadows, the embrace of the unknown. They were not evil nor cold, simply eternal. They cloaked what would come, giving contrast to light, before light ever existed. Gaia, deep and dreaming, gave birth to Urea, the sacred mountains, silent, watching. From her came Pontus, the boundless sea, rolling and endless. And then came Uranus, the star-filled sky, born to rise above her, to arch over Gaia in shimmering stillness. They did not walk among mortals. They did not whisper or rage. These were not gods in the form of men and women. They were forces, the bones of the universe. They did not rule over creation, they were creation. This was the age before the Titans, before time ticked and the sun rose, a time of raw divinity, of deep breath and cosmic sleep, where love was power, earth was consciousness, and the void was a womb. A time when even the gods had no name, only presence. And from their presence came everything, the rise of the Titans, Gaia's wrath, and Uranus's fall. As the cosmos began to take shape, Gaia, the ancient earth, lay beneath the starry arch of Uranus, the sky. Together they formed the first union of heaven and earth, and from this sacred bond came life. Not soft, not gentle, but vast, unstoppable life. From Gaia's womb came the Titans, mighty beings of immense strength and power. There were 12 in total, 6 sons and 6 daughters. Towering and proud, they carried the weight of potential upon their shoulders. Among them were Oceanus, ruler of the endless rivers that encircle the world, Hyperion, lord of light, Thea, shining goddess of sight, Rhea, future mother of gods, and Cronus, the youngest and most cunning. But Gaia bore other children, too. Children Uranus did not love. From deep within her came the Cyclopes beings with a single, all-seeing eye, masters of divine fire and thunder. And darker still, she birthed the Hecatoncheires, monstrous giants with 100 hands and 50 heads, chaotic, uncontrollable and terrifying, even to the gods. Uranus looked upon these offspring and felt only disgust. In fear and shame, he cast them down, shoving them deep into Gaia's body, imprisoning them in the shadows of the earth. There, in torment, they howled. Their pain echoed through the mountains and rattled the rivers. Gaia suffered. She endured her children's cries within her belly and the oppression of Uranus above. Her love turned bitter. Her sorrow grew into anger, and her anger became a quiet, ancient vengeance. One night beneath a moonless sky, Gaia reached out to her children, the Titans, and whispered, "Who among you will rise against your father? Who will free your brothers from the depths? Who will bring change to the heavens?" 11 Titans fell silent. Only Cronus, sharp-eyed and full of ambition, stepped forward. "I will," he said. "Give me the weapon, and I will strike." From within herself, Gaia forged a sickle of black, adamant cold, unbreakable, forged from her very bones. She gave it to Cronus, and he hid among the shadows of the night. When Uranus descended to lie upon Gaia once more, unaware of the trap set in silence, Cronus emerged. With one swift, unrelenting stroke, he severed the sky from the earth. Blood poured from Uranus, falling upon Gaia, and giving rise to new life, terrible and divine. From the drops were born the Erinyes, the Furies, the Giants, and the Meliae nymphs of ash trees. And from the sea where his severed flesh fell, rose Aphrodite, beauty born from violence. Uranus, broken and defeated, fled. But before disappearing into the heavens, he cast one final curse. "You, Cronus, will be overthrown by your own child, as you overthrew me." Cronus laughed, then proud and defiant. He ruled from the highest mountain, cloaked in golden light. This was the age of the Titans, an age of order, of rising gods, and of glorious power. But Gaia remained silent, because she had heard the curse. And deep within Cronus's shadow, fate had already begun to turn. The child of thunder, the birth of Zeus, and the fall of Cronus. Cronus had triumphed. He had taken up his mother Gaia's sickle and cast down his father Uranus, ushering in a new age, the age of the Titans. From atop the world he ruled with unshakable confidence, watching the cosmos take form and move in quiet order, believing his reign to be eternal. But Gaia did not forget, and neither could Cronus. The final curse of Uranus echoed in his mind, like a mark carved into stone. "You will be overthrown by your own child, as you have overthrown me." Cronus feared. That fear grew into obsession. And so when his wife and sister, the Titaness Rhea, gave birth to their first child, Cronus came. Without hesitation, he took the newborn from her arms and swallowed it whole. No blood, no sound, no trace. Rhea was horrified, but one by one, she bore 5 more children: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Each was met with the same fate, swallowed into the dark, divine pit of their father's body, as if Cronus could consume destiny itself. Rhea was left with nothing but sorrow. Yet when the 6th child was near Gaia, ancient, ever watchful, whispered to her, not with wrath, but with hope. "This child must be hidden. Let the storm be born." Rhea fled the reach of Cronus and journeyed to the island of Crete, where deep within a cave, under Mount Ida, surrounded by wind and wildwood, she gave birth to her final son, Zeus. The infant did not cry. He opened his eyes, and lightning lived within them. This was no ordinary child. He was a storm given flesh. Rhea entrusted Zeus to the divine goat Amalthea and the guardian spirits known as the Coretes, who clashed their swords and shields in rhythmic chaos to mask the boy's cries from Cronus. She then returned to the palace, cradling a stone wrapped in cloth. Cronus, still obsessed, swallowed it without question. Meanwhile, Zeus grew. He grew beneath the earth among the roar of hidden thunder, and when the time came, he did not return as a son but as a tempest, sent to unmake the old world. With the aid of Metis, goddess of cunning, Zeus tricked Cronus into drinking a potion infused with divine magic. The Titan retched, and from within his immortal belly the 5 gods he had once devoured were reborn: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and finally Zeus, their youngest and their storm. For the first time, the 6 stood side by side, not as victims, but as vengeance. The battle began. The Titanomachy, a war between the old gods and the new. On one side stood the ancient Titans, towering primal forged in the stillness of the cosmos. On the other stood the Olympians, young, brilliant, and burning with fury. The war raged for 10 years, shaking the pillars of the earth, splitting mountains, boiling seas, and tearing stars from the sky. But the turning point came when Zeus descended into Tartarus, the deepest place in all existence, and freed those whom Cronus had once feared and imprisoned. The monstrous Hecatoncheires with 100 hands, and the blazing-eyed Cyclopes. Out of gratitude and vengeance they gifted Zeus the ultimate weapons, a thunderbolt crackling with storm fire, a trident to grant Poseidon dominion over the seas, a helm of shadows allowing Hades to vanish into the unseen. With these, the Olympians rose. And Cronus, who had swallowed his children and denied his fate, was cast down bound in unbreakable chains and hurled into the dark abyss of Tartarus, the very prison he had once created for others. The age of the Titans had ended, and the reign of the Olympian gods had begun. But deep beneath the surface, in the silent bones of the world, Gaia was stirring, and something far older than the Titans was beginning to awaken. Typhon Gaia's final wrath. The Titans had fallen. Cronus was bound with eternal chains and cast into Tartarus, where no light ever reached. On Mount Olympus, the air rang with the chorus of victory. Zeus ascended the throne, lightning bolt in hand, and laid the foundations of a new divine order. Beside him stood his radiant siblings. Poseidon ruled the seas, Hades the underworld, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia watched over heaven, earth, and hearth. A new world had taken shape, but deep beneath the earth's crust, in the layers of stone, untouched by light, Gaia still lingered. She did not rejoice. She was not at peace. Eternal Mother Earth had seen 2 generations of her children rise and be destroyed, each consumed by war, betrayal, and ambition. She had given power to Uranus, then Cronus, then Zeus, and all had brought blood and chains. Now Gaia neither wept nor cried out. She simply stirred like molten lava, slowly swelling beneath the fragile crust of peace. And from that final rage, Gaia did not birth a god. She brought forth a vengeance with flesh, Typhon, the most monstrous being the world would ever know. He was not born like the gods. He erupted, forged from pure wrath, chaos given sinew and fire. From the waist up he resembled a colossal man, but his arms were living serpents, each hissing and snapping with cursed souls. His eyes blazed with eternal fire, his mouth vomited molten stone, and his voice could shatter the air itself. His legs were coiled dragons, and his vast wings spread across the heavens, like eclipses plunging the world into unnatural darkness. Typhon did not scream when he rose. He was silent, and that silence made the birds fall mid-flight, the ocean still, and the wind itself retreat. When he stood upon the land, the gods on Olympus felt his presence like a blade pressed to their throats. Zeus looked down from his throne, and for the first time in his life, he hesitated. Typhon did not wait. He soared toward Olympus, his voice splitting the sky as he roared, "I am not the son of the sky, I am born of the earth. You call yourselves gods, but Olympus shall become your tomb." Zeus responded with thunder and lightning, and the battle between storm and chaos began. The skies burned red. Bolts of lightning tore the heavens, but Typhon caught them in his serpent hands, twisted them into coils, and hurled them back. In a moment of recklessness, he struck Zeus, ripping the tendons from his divine hands, robbing him of his grip on power. He hurled the king of gods into a deep cave beneath the earth, stripped of strength and storm. Typhon hid the thunderbolt, the very symbol of Zeus's reign, in a dark abyss guarded by immortal dragons. Olympus shook. The gods retreated not out of cowardice, but to preserve the balance of the cosmos. The sun vanished. The moon refused to rise. The world held its breath. All living things believed the end had come. In the darkness, Zeus recovered not through pride, but with purpose. He recalled Gaia's prophecy, "Only the storm born of storm may extinguish chaos." With the help of Hermes, the swift-footed and pan-god of the primal scream, Zeus escaped the cave. He reclaimed the lightning forged for him by the Cyclopes, and this time he did not pause. From the peak of Mount Etna, Zeus rose like a tempest, reborn his arm alight with storm fire. With a cry that split the cosmos, he hurled the thunderbolt at Typhon once, twice, hundreds of times, until the heavens cracked fire rained upon the earth, and Typhon, born to unmake the divine, fell. He was buried beneath the smoking earth. To this day, he lies entombed under Mount Etna. And when the mountain roars or spits fire, the people say it is Typhon turning in his sleep, remembering the day he dared to challenge the gods. Zeus returned to Olympus not in triumph, but in vigilance. The gods reclaimed the sky, the sea, and the underworld, and balance was restored, but not without scar. Even gods had learned the weight of fear, and far beneath Gaia still watches. She may be silent, but she has never surrendered. One day they say she will rise again, and what comes next will be older than chaos itself. The division, the world, when the gods shaped the cosmos. The storm of Typhon had passed. The volcano no longer screamed. The sky seemed rinsed clean of ash and flame. Zeus returned from the brink of both defeat and triumph, stood once again among the gods atop Mount Olympus. They had fought. They had reclaimed the heavens from chaos. But now, a greater question remained. Who would rule what? The world was no longer a shapeless void. It had opened into three distinct realms, the sky vast and eternal above, the sea wild and restless as it wrapped around the lands, and the underworld a cold and shadowed place beneath, where spirits wandered after death. The three sons of Cronus, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades knew the world must be divided. No one god could hold everything. The time of the Titans was over. They were the new gods, and with power came the understanding that balance must be preserved. There was no bloodshed, no treachery. Instead, they laid their hands upon the staff of fate and swore by the sky, the sea, and the deep earth. The fate of the cosmos would be decided not by ambition, but by destiny. And so they turned to an ancient rite, the drawing of lots, a ritual passed down from Gaia herself, older than time. No tricks, no arguments, only the will of the universe. The first lot fell to Zeus. He looked up into the endless blue, where clouds danced like divine breath, where thunder waited to be summoned, and the sky became his domain. From that moment forward, Zeus was the god of the sky, king of the gods' ruler, from the highest seat atop Olympus. Poseidon drew the second lot. The sea boundless, fierce, never resting, became his kingdom. He became god of the oceans, master of tides and storms, able to split the sea with a single thrust of his trident. The final lot, less fortunate, fell to Hades, but he did not protest. He did not curse his fate, for he understood that death was not punishment, it was order. From then on, he became god of the underworld, guardian of souls, keeper of boundaries between life and the silence beyond. The three brothers, each bearing a unique flame, a separate purpose, divided the world with solemn grace. Yet they remained kin-bound by the same Earth Mother, the same Titan blood, the same breath of chaos that had once birthed them all. And so it was that the sky, the sea, and the underworld came to be. Olympus, the sacred mountain, became the meeting place of gods, the seat from which fate and mortal lives would be guided. But even after the division, the universe would never remain silent for long. For somewhere in the wind, Gaia still sighed, and mankind, a new being soon to be shaped, would become the next challenge. A species born of freedom, curiosity, and the potential to defy even the gods. But that is another story. The forgotten ages when the gods gave life to man. The sky was ruled, the sea tamed, the underworld sealed. Olympus stood gleaming above the world, and the gods, new and eternal, sat upon their thrones watching the universe settle into rhythm. But the world, despite its majesty, was quiet. Too quiet. No voices rose from the valleys. No laughter echoed through the forests. No fire flickered in the night, save for that of the stars. It was then that Prometheus, the Titan who had survived the great wars, looked down upon the silent earth and said, "This world was made to breathe." He saw the rivers without song, the mountains without prayer, and the forests without witness. And from clay and water, Prometheus sculpted a new being, not divine, not monstrous, but something in between, something mortal. And with his own hands he shaped man, but flesh alone was not enough. When the form was complete, Prometheus stole fire from the heavens, not just the flame that warms hands, but the spark of thought, the fire of curiosity, the defiance of death, he gifted it to humanity, and they awoke, eyes wide, hearts racing, minds burning with questions even the gods had never asked. They named the stars, they carved the trees, they lit the first flames and built the first homes. The gods at first watched with fascination, then with unease. Prometheus had given mortals not just life, but potential. And potential was dangerous. Still, Zeus allowed them to flourish for a time. Thus began the ages of man, a quiet legend whispered in the winds of time, long before books, long before kings. The Golden Age came first, a time of peace when man lived close to the gods, untouched by death, free from toil. The earth bore fruit without labor, the rivers flowed sweet, and no lie had yet been spoken. Men did not fear, they did not age, they simply were. But the gods, growing distant, turned their eyes elsewhere, and the Golden Age faded. Then came the Silver Age. Man still lived long, but they grew proud. They built homes, too high walls, too thick. They began to forget who had made them. They raised altars not for worship, but for power. They questioned Olympus, and so Zeus sent storms, plagues, silence. The silver faded. The Bronze Age followed an age of war. Men forged weapons from the earth and spilled blood on its soil. Cities burned and kings rose from ashes, only to be swallowed again. This was the first time death became sacred, and the underworld stirred with souls. Then came the age of heroes, brief and brilliant. mortals whose names would echo through eternity: Heracles, Perseus, Achilles. They stood between gods and man, half divine, half damned. They built cities and toppled tyrants. But heroes bring glory only by dancing with doom. And at last came the Iron Age, the age we know. Men forgot the gods. Temples crumbled. Myths turned to stories, stories to fables, and fables to dust. The fire of Prometheus still burns, but it is hidden beneath fear and greed. This is an age of toil, of hunger, of darkness and brilliance, stitched together. And even now, as Olympus sits quiet above the clouds, the gods still watch. They whisper in dreams. They stir in storms. They wait not with anger, but with a kind of sorrow. For it was not hate that broke the bond between God and man. It was time, a slow erosion, a gentle forgetting, and perhaps, somewhere in the last breath of a dying man, or the first cry of a newborn, the old flame still glows. The fire that began with clay, stoked with rebellion, and carved the memory of gods into the bones of mankind. The fire that once made man look up at the stars and dare to ask why. Pandora, when curiosity unleashed sorrow. After the fire was stolen, and man awakened with breath and thought, the gods of Olympus sat in uneasy silence. Zeus, high upon his throne, watched the flames flicker in mortal hands, and felt the bitterness of defiance linger in the air. Prometheus had not only shaped man from clay and gifted him fire, he had stolen the privilege of the gods and placed it into trembling, curious hands. Zeus could not undo the act, for to reclaim the fire would be to unmake life itself. But gods did not forget, and they did not forgive. If Prometheus had given man his gift in secret, then Zeus would give his gift in plain sight. Not out of mercy, but as a warning, a lesson forged not in rage, but in elegance and consequence. He summoned Hephaestus, the divine smith, and commanded him to shape a new creation. From celestial clay and fire, molded in the furnaces of volcanoes, Hephaestus crafted a woman of such flawless beauty that the heavens paused to gaze upon her. She was graceful like the wind, and radiant like the moon, a being sculpted not to destroy, but to undo. The gods came one by one, each offering a gift. Aphrodite gave her beauty that would enchant. Hermes gave her cunning and a silken tongue. Athena gifted her with grace and the skill of hand. But beneath all these blessings, another was woven into her core, quiet, glowing, undetectable, to the naked eye curiosity. They named her Pandora, all gifted, and into her hands Zeus placed a sealed jar, a gleaming vessel bound with sacred words and warnings. He told her only this: do not open it. And then he sent her down into the world of men, wrapped not in threat, but in wonder. When Pandora arrived on earth, her presence stirred the hearts of men. They had never seen a creature like her. Even the sun seemed to pause as she walked. Among them was Epimetheus, brother of Prometheus, gentle and trusting, who, forgetting all counsel and warnings, welcomed her with open arms. He took her into his home, into his life, and soon into his love. For a time, all was peaceful. Pandora lived among men, radiant and silent, her hands gentle, her gaze calm. But always in the corner of their dwelling stood the jar. It hummed softly, like something sleeping but breathing. Pandora passed it daily, never touching it, but feeling it grow inside her like a seed. Curiosity is not loud. It is patient. It waits. It coils itself in the corners of the mind, whispering not commands, but questions. Why? What is inside? Who sealed it? What are they hiding? It grew until one morning when the sky was quiet, and Epimetheus still in dreams, She walked to the jar with trembling hands and lifted the lid. The world broke open. From within the jar exploded every sorrow that had ever been imagined. Out poured plague with invisible fingers, greed with burning eyes, war with steel breath. Jealousy, madness, aging, toil, fear, all these things surged into the world like a swarm of shadow and fire. They spread across the earth faster than thought. Trees withered, rivers fouled, men fought and fell. The age of peace died in a single moment, not by blade, but by curiosity. Pandora cried out and tried to seal the jar, but what had escaped could not be undone. She fell to her knees, clutching the vessel, now silent again, hollow and terrible. But as her tears fell onto the lid, she heard a faint fluttering from within. One last thing remained. It had not flown out with the rest. At the very bottom of the jar, curled like a child, trembling but alive, there was hope. It did not scream. It did not burn. It glowed, soft, steady. Pandora reached in and touched it. Some say she let it go, releasing hope into the world, like a lantern into darkness. Others say she sealed it back inside, fearful that even hope, once unleashed, could betray. Whichever truth is real, one thing remains certain from that day forward. Mankind lived not in paradise, but in reality, a world where pain was born from wonder, and wonder never again came without price. But within every suffering heart, there still flickered that last ember. Small, faint, unyielding, hope, the one gift Pandora never meant to find, yet the one that may yet save us all. Prometheus, the price of fire. Long after the world was broken open by curiosity and sorrow, had settled into the hearts of men, the gods looked down from Olympus, not with wrathful thunder, but with quiet resolve. The balance had shifted. Mortals now lived in a world of pain and death, of struggle and fleeting beauty. And though the winds of Olympus were still, Zeus had not forgotten the one who had lit that first forbidden spark, Prometheus. The fire that had once belonged only to the heavens now warmed the hands of man. It built hearths, forged blades, cooked food, and lit the way through darkness. But more than warmth or light, it gave mortals a power once sacred, the power to shape their own destiny. It made them question. It made them build. It made them defy. Prometheus had not only sculpted man from the mud of Gaia, but had challenged the will of Olympus, believing that compassion for mortals was greater than obedience to gods. And Zeus, who had allowed the world to burn with war and bloom with grief, had reserved a punishment unlike any before or after. He did not hurl a bolt. He did not summon flood or storm. Instead, he sentenced Prometheus to eternity. 2 silent servants of Zeus came under cover of sky and wind. They seized the Titan who did not resist. For Prometheus had seen this moment long ago, not in fear, but in clarity. He had known that gifts come with cost, that rebellion always asks for payment. And so, wordless and still, they took him across the continents, past rivers and empires, yet unborn to the edge of the known world. There, where the mountains scraped the clouds and the silence swallowed all sound, stood a single peak, Mount Caucasus. It was ancient before Olympus had a name. The rock there was jagged and black, forged from the bones of the earth's first rage. And upon that cliff they chained him, with links of adamantine, forged in the furnaces of divine law. They bound his wrists and ankles to the face of the mountain. The chains bit into flesh that would not bleed, muscles that would not wither a body, cursed not to die, but to endure. Then came the final cruelty, a shadow that crossed the sun. The eagle, not an ordinary bird, but a beast sent by Zeus himself. Its wings spread like storm clouds, Its talons gleamed with eternal hunger, and every day it would descend upon the Titan's chest. It would pierce his side. It would rip open his flesh and feast upon his liver, the seat of resilience, the organ that grew back each night with divine agony. Prometheus screamed, but no sound reached the earth. He writhed, but the mountain never shook. Each morning the eagle returned. Each night his wound closed, and the cycle began again. Not for days, not for years, but for ages. Time passed like wind over stone, slow indifferent. Civilizations rose beneath his feet, unaware of the god who hung above them. Men who had once worshipped fire forgot his name, and still he endured not in silence but in defiance. For even as the eagle tore at his ribs, Prometheus never begged. He never repented. He never cursed man for what he had done. In his agony there was purpose, and in his suffering there was pride, for he had not stolen fire for power, but for hope. Some say the gods would visit him in secret, that Hermes once asked him why he had done it. Prometheus only smiled through cracked lips and whispered, "Because I could." Others say he held a secret. One even Zeus feared a prophecy of a child yet unborn, who would rise above Olympus and end the tyranny of thunder. Perhaps it was that knowledge that stayed Zeus's hand from simply destroying him. Perhaps even kings of heaven fear their future. But Prometheus hung there alone, eternal the first to suffer for the sins of love. And still to this day, when lightning cracks across a mountain, some say it's not just the storm, but the echo of chains. And when fire is struck from stone, there is a whisper in the spark, a name long forgotten but never gone: Prometheus. The hero who freed Prometheus. For countless generations, Prometheus remained upon the cliffside, chained to the black bones of Mount Caucasus, where thunder rarely reached, and winds whispered in tongues too old for men to understand. There beneath the sunless sky and among forgotten peaks, the Titan endured, as he had always endured, not in silence, but in fierce, burning defiance. Each day, the eagle returned. Each day it tore at his flesh, and each night his body grew whole again. Time passed not in years, but in eras. The world below shifted. Cities rose and crumbled. Empires were born and swallowed by sand. Gods were worshipped and forgotten. But Prometheus remained a monument to sacrifice, chained by the very sky he had once challenged. But fate, like the fire he had once gifted, is never truly still. And in the age of mortal heroes, an age of lions, labors, and legends, a new figure rose beneath the gaze of Olympus. His name was Heracles, son of Zeus, and a mortal woman born with strength that cracked mountains and a temper that no god could break. He was neither Titan nor immortal, yet in his blood ran the fury of gods and the will of man. Tasked with impossible labors by a king trembling with fear, Heracles wandered the earth like a storm with purpose. He had slain the Hydra, tamed the stag of Artemis, and wrestled monsters born before memory. And now, as his final trials neared his path, took him east to the place where maps ended and myths began. No one told Heracles to climb Mount Caucasus. No oracle whispered its name, but the wind carried something, a breath of old pain, a scent of iron and fire, and his feet moved as if pulled by memory not his own. For even in Olympus gods cannot chain stories forever. He climbed without fear. Rocks crumbled beneath him. Clouds parted. And when he reached the summit, he saw the figure they had all tried to forget. There, stretched across the jagged face of the world, was Prometheus, gaunt, weathered, godlike, even in ruin. His eyes sunken and fire-lit opened slowly. He did not cry out. He simply looked at the mortal who stood before him, mortal but more than man. Heracles said nothing at first. He looked up at the eagle circling above, and then down at the chains glowing faintly with ancient power. No god had given him permission to come here. No god had ordered him to act. But Heracles had never asked for permission, and so he drew his bow. With a single arrow he struck the eagle through the heart. It fell silent, sudden wings folding like broken oaths as it vanished into the clouds below. Then Heracles turned to the chains. They were not made of metal, but of divine law of punishment, forged by fear and pride. Yet Heracles gripped them with mortal hands and tore them from the mountain. They shattered like old stone, screaming not with sound, but with the memory of Olympus cracking. Prometheus fell to his knees. He did not weep. He did not thank. He simply breathed for the first time in 10,000 years free. Heracles, ever restless, offered no speeches. He nodded once, turned, and began his descent. The wind howled in recognition as if the mountain itself had witnessed something sacred. Prometheus remained for a while, atop the peak, looking out over a world he no longer knew. The stars had changed. The songs of men were strange. But the fire in their hearts, that ancient defiant light, still flickered. He had paid the price, and now that fire burned brighter than ever. When the gods looked down and saw what had been done, they did not send wrath. Zeus, far away upon his throne, heard the silence where the eagle once flew and closed his eyes. He knew this day would come. A prophecy long buried had unfolded without his hand, and perhaps in that quiet surrender there was peace, for Prometheus had taught the gods that fire cannot be taken back once it is given, and Heracles had taught them that even chains forged by gods may break in the hands of men. Heracles, the trials and the madness of a god. In a world woven with divine threads and mortal suffering, there was one name whispered across the ages, with equal parts awe and sorrow. Heracles, the lion-hearted son of Zeus. Born of a mortal woman but marked by the thunder god himself, he was destined to be more than a man and less than a god, a hero forged in contradiction. From the moment of his birth, the heavens trembled. Hera, wife of Zeus, looked upon the infant with burning disdain. He was proof of her husband's betrayal, a breathing reminder that even Olympus bore the seeds of infidelity. She cursed him not with death, but with something more cruel, a life shaped by struggle. And so, the gods, with their twisted sense of justice, poured endless trials into the path of the child, who would grow to defy both destiny and divine wrath. Heracles did not flinch. He grew strong, too strong for the villages that raised him, too wild for the teachers who tried to tame him. With each year, his name spread like fire across kingdoms. He slayed beasts others could not name. He cracked stone with his fists. He wrestled rivers into silence. But his strength was not born from arrogance, it was born from a need to endure what others would never survive. And yet strength alone is not armor against the gods. One quiet dawn under a sky heavy with mist, madness descended not from within, but from above. Hera, patient in her hatred, sent it into his mind, like smoke into a sealed chamber. It did not roar. It crept. Heracles awoke not to the world, but to a vision twisted by divine cruelty. He saw enemies where there were none. He heard laughter in the cries of those who loved him. He saw monsters in the eyes of his wife and children, and in that haze of god-born rage, he killed them all. His wife Megara, his sons, his blood. His hands, once weapons of justice, were now stained with the deepest crime. When the madness lifted, he stood alone in silence. The earth beneath him did not crack. The sky did not cry. But something in Heracles broke not his strength, but his soul. He wandered no longer a hero, no longer a man, just a shadow wrapped in skin. He sought out the Oracle of Delphi, desperate not for redemption, but for a reason to continue breathing. And the gods, with their cold symmetry, gave him 12 impossible labors, not as punishment, but as atonement. The first was the Nemean lion, its hide so thick no weapon could pierce it. Heracles wrestled it with bare hands, choking life from the beast with the same hands that had held his sons. Next came the Lernaean Hydra, a serpent with many heads that regrew each time one was cut. Heracles scorched the stumps with fire, sealing the necks with ash, just as he tried to seal the memories that haunted him. Then came the Ceryneian hind, the Erymanthian boar, the Augean stables, the Stymphalian birds, and more, each task impossible, each conquest a whisper that perhaps even a cursed soul could carve a path through shame. He labored not for glory, but for silence, not for Olympus, but for the hope that in motion he might outrun his own past. But the truth clung to him. He could not bring back the dead. He could not unmake the madness. He could only carry it. With each labor the world called him hero. Songs were sung, statues raised. But Heracles never smiled at praise. His victories were not trophies, they were wounds turned outward. And still Hera watched. She could not destroy him, but she could make sure he never rested. For what greater punishment is there than for a man to achieve everything, and still be haunted by his own hands? Yet despite all torment, Heracles remained unbroken, not untouched, not unscarred, but undaunted. He became more than a man, more than myth. He became a symbol not of perfection, but of what it means to rise after ruin. And in the deepest chambers of Olympus, even the gods in their golden stillness began to wonder. If a mortal could endure what they could not, then who truly held the greater power? The death of Heracles and the fire that made him a god. The years passed, and Heracles carried them like mountains on his shoulders, not because he sought immortality, but because he could not rest. Each labor completed, each monster slain, each injustice shattered beneath his hands. None could wash away the memory of the madness that had once hollowed his soul. He walked the earth as a hero, but inside, he remained a man pursued not by beasts, but by the echoes of his own past. Though the songs called him invincible, Heracles bled. He aged, and in the quiet spaces between battles, he wondered whether the gods would ever allow him to die. Not as a punishment, but as a release. It was fate that led him to his final hour, not prophecy. He had wed again, this time to Deianira, a woman as proud and passionate as the river that bore her name. She loved him fiercely, but the stories of Heracles' strength came with shadows of old loves, of wandering eyes, of hearts left behind. And when love mixes with fear, it becomes a potion far stronger than poison. Once, while traveling together, Heracles and Deianira came upon a river too deep to cross. There they met Nessus, a centaur, with a voice as smooth as the current. He offered to carry Deianira across on his back, while Heracles swam. But Nessus, stirred by lust or arrogance, tried to take her for himself. Heracles saw the betrayal from the far bank, raised his bow, and loosed a single arrow dipped in the blood of the Hydra into the centaur's heart. Nessus fell, gasping his last, but as he died, he whispered into Deianira's ear, a lie sweet enough to sour any soul, that his blood could keep Heracles faithful. That if she ever feared losing him, she need only soak a robe in it, and he would love no other. Time passed, and the seed of doubt once planted bloomed. Years later, when Heracles returned from a journey, and Deianira saw the admiration in another woman's eyes, she remembered Nessus's final words. In secret, she took one of Heracles' robes and soaked it in the centaur's poisoned blood, then sent it to him as a gift of affection, never knowing she had sealed his fate. When Heracles donned the robe, the pain was instant. It was not fire. It was worse. His flesh burned, but not with flame, with a venom that crawled beneath the skin, devouring him from within. His muscles split. His veins seared. He tore at the robe, but it clung like memory, like guilt, like destiny. He cried out, not in fear, but in fury, not at Deianira, but at the gods who had made him too strong to die quickly. In agony, he climbed the slopes of Mount Oeta, dragging the weight of his own death behind him. Upon its peak, he gathered wood and built his own funeral pyre, not as a plea for pity, but as a final act of power. No mortal hand dared light it, until Philoctetes, his loyal companion, stepped forward with silent reverence and touched the flame to kindling. The fire rose, and Heracles burned not with suffering, but with transformation. His mortal form, cursed and bloodied, turned to ash. But from the smoke, his soul rose like a second sun, untouched by Hydra's venom, unburdened by Hera's hatred, carried by wind, not down to the underworld, but upward, to Olympus. The gods, even Hera, watched in silence, and in that moment they remembered. Not just the madness, not just the blood, but the man who had endured what no god ever could. And so Zeus opened the gates of the heavens, and Heracles ascended, no longer a hero of the earth, but a god of strength and redemption. He was welcomed not with celebration, but with quiet awe. He took his place among the immortals not by birthright, but by fire, grief, and defiance. And in time, even Hera let go of her wrath. She gave him her daughter, Hebe, goddess of youth, as his divine bride. In Olympus, Heracles found what he had never known in life: rest, peace, and a place not as a tool of fate, but as its challenger. To mortals he remained legend. To the gods he became a reminder that greatness is not born from perfection, but from endurance. And even now, when storms shake the heavens and fires rage across mountain and sea, they say it is Heracles, not as a curse, but as a guardian, reminding the world that no pain is eternal, if one dares to climb through it. The end of the age of heroes. The sky no longer thundered as it once had. The gods still watched from Olympus, but their voices were softer, now their hands more distant. The great storms had passed. The golden halls above the clouds echoed with fewer footsteps, and the world below had begun to change. The age of heroes, brilliant, violent, glorious, was nearing its final breath. It had been an age of giants in mortal skin, of sons born of gods, carrying the weight of fate on their shoulders. Perseus had slain the Gorgon. Theseus had conquered the labyrinth. Jason had sailed beyond the edge of maps. And Heracles, the greatest of them all, had ascended into immortality through pain and fire. Their names were etched into marble, whispered in temples, sung by poets under olive trees. But as the generations turned, the stories began to fade, not forgotten, but softened. Men had begun to rule themselves. Where once kings were chosen by divine lineage or celestial omen, now they were forged through politics, conquest, and gold. Cities grew, but temples crumbled. The world no longer asked what the gods willed, it asked what man could build. The earth did not protest. It simply listened. The gods, once so near, stepped back, not in anger, but perhaps in sorrow. They had created mankind in the image of struggle, gifted them fire, thought, and desire. But now mankind no longer looked to the stars for answers. They looked inward, and so began the slow forgetting. It didn't come with flames or fury. It came with silence. Children no longer feared thunder as the voice of Zeus. Sailors no longer prayed to Poseidon before setting to sea. Farmers no longer thanked Demeter at harvest, nor feared Hades at the grave. The wind still blew, the sun still rose, but the gods were no longer in every echo. Their temples became ruins. Their statues were swallowed by vine and moss, and in time, even their names turned to legend. But not all was lost. Some stories endured, not in books, not on scrolls, but in the blood, in the breath, in the soul of the world itself, a whisper on the wind before a battle, the flicker of fire that will not die, the feeling that someone, something still watches from above when the world grows quiet. These are the remnants of Olympus scattered like stars, too faint to name, but too old to disappear. As the age faded, the final hero stood between myth and memory. His name was Odysseus, a man of wit rather than strength, of cunning rather than blood. He was no demigod, but his tale stretched across oceans and decades, proving that even as gods faded, the spirit of the hero remained. He sailed where monsters still hid in the foam. He defied gods, bargained with the dead, and returned not as a conqueror, but as a man broken by the sea and rebuilt by the journey. With him the age ended. The divine would not vanish, not entirely, but never again would gods walk so close. Never again would heroes rise to tear open the sky. The world had passed from myth into history, from legend into law, and yet, sometimes just before dawn, when the air is still and the stars have not yet dimmed, a hush falls over the world. It is in that hush that one might feel it, the heartbeat of the old world, the echo of swords clashing under divine light, the whisper of Apollo's song drifting across mountain tops, the memory of Prometheus's fire, of Pandora's jar, of Heracles' chains. It is not gone. It is merely sleeping. Because myth does not die. It waits. For the moment, someone looks at the world and dares to believe in gods again. They say the night once had no name. Long ago, before men feared the dark, before gods walked among clouds and cast lightning from mountain tops, there was only silence when the sun fell. But from that silence came a presence not loud, not cruel, but still, terrible in stillness and ancient beyond even chaos itself. Her name was Hecate, and she did not come with thunder or song, but with the hush of black wings, the sound of a breath drawn behind a locked door, the flicker of torchlight just beyond a crossroads. She was not born of Olympus. No, she was older. Older than Apollo's lyre, older than Hera's jealousy, older than Zeus's throne. She came from the dark corners of the world that never knew fire, from the still gaps between life and death, from the curve of shadows where the underworld meets the air above, and though she walked alone, the dead followed her. It was said that even Hades averted his gaze when Hecate passed through the underworld. Not because she threatened him, but because she did not ask permission. She did not need it. The dead whispered to her as if she were their queen, though she wore no crown. Spirits rose from tombs, not in protest, but in reverence. At the threshold between worlds, she stood always at the edge of what is and what was, what breathes and what remembers. She bore three faces, though not all could see them. One looked forward into the realm of the living. One looked back into the arms of the dead. The third, the most terrible, looked into what could be. They called her the guardian of the crossroads, for wherever three paths met, beneath starlight, she could be found. And in those places, sacrifices were left: honey, garlic, blood, and black dog's fur, not for thanks, but for mercy. Because those who wandered into her domain without reverence never left whole. The story of the lost maiden. There is a tale whispered by those too old to be believed of a girl who once stepped into the forest to fetch water before dusk, and never returned the same. Her name has been lost like so many who crossed Hecate's path. They say she heard barking in the dark. Not one dog, but many a cacophony of howls that rose all at once, then stopped. Silence followed the kind that thickens the air and freezes the bones. Then came the torchlight, 3 flames floating in a triangle, and a woman cloaked in black, her face veiled save for eyes that shimmered like polished obsidian. She spoke not with her mouth but with something beneath sound. You stand where paths cross. Do you seek what was what is or what must be? The girl trembled, clutched the pail to her chest, and turned back. But the forest no longer remembered her. Trees leaned where they had not before. The moon glared red, and the path home had vanished. They say she returned to her village at sunrise, her pail still full, but her eyes empty. She no longer spoke save for murmured fragments in languages no one knew. She would wake in the night to light torches and leave them at the edge of town. No one dared ask why, and when the dogs began howling at moonless nights, the villagers left offerings at the crossroads just in case. Hecate and Demeter's despair. Even among gods, Hecate walked alone. But there was one tale where she stepped closer to the divine during the grief of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, when her daughter Persephone vanished from the world. While Olympus bickered and mortals starved in the fields, it was Hecate who walked through flame and shadow to seek the truth. With twin torches in hand, she descended into the hollows of the earth, where roots twisted like bones, and the silence tasted of ash. She passed Cerberus without fear. The 3-headed hound of Hades lowered its gaze and whimpered like a pup. Deeper still she walked until she came to the throne of the Lord of the Dead, who sat silent and cold beside Persephone, the child queen, with flowers still dying in her hair. Hecate said nothing. She simply looked, and Persephone saw her, truly saw her, and wept. Hecate did not promise freedom. She did not threaten or plead. She only turned to Hades and said, "She is not yours alone." And in that moment, something ancient stirred in the darkness. Not fear, not love, but balance. Thus was struck the accord that Persephone would walk both worlds 6 months in the light, 6 months in shadow. And from that pact, seasons were born. The Queen of Ghosts. As centuries passed and gods faded into memory, Hecate remained. Not in the temples, for she never asked for grandeur, but in the forgotten places, abandoned wells, cracked doorways, crossroads, no longer marked on maps. She became the patron of witches, those who spoke to the stars and listened to the wind. Her name was whispered during rites performed in moonlight, and her presence was marked by black dogs and silver blades. No spell was cast without invoking her name. No spirit summoned without first offering her breath. She was feared, yes, but more than that, she was respected, because she did not seek worship. She did not promise blessings. She offered something rarer truth, not in words, but in signs, in dreams, in moments that pulled the veil aside and let mortals glimpse the bones of fate beneath their skin. Even now, when dogs bark at nothing in the dead of night, and you feel that flicker of something moving just beyond your vision, they say, Hecate walks, torch in hand, cloaked in shadow, watching not with malice but with memory, because every choice, every path, every soul that stands at a crossroads belongs to her. And when the world forgets its gods, when temples fall and names fade, she remains, not loud, not proud, but eternal. Aeolus, the lord of the whispers, they say the winds do not speak, but only because no one dares to listen long enough. Yet there was a time far older than ships, older than sails, older even than stars, when the winds had names, tempers, and will. And there was one who ruled them not as a king atop a golden throne, but as a keeper of breath itself. Aeolus, not the thunder god, not the flame-bearer, not the lord of light or death, but the one who held in his grasp the most ancient and wild thing of all the air between all things. To call him merely a god of wind would be to name fire nothing more than heat. For Aeolus did not simply guide breezes or summon storms. He listened to the voice of the air, to the sighs that echoed between mountain tops, to the howls that danced along the bones of shipwrecks, and to the hush that crept through empty deserts before the storm was born. He dwelled not in Olympus, but on a drifting isle, Aeolia, a place so remote that its shores moved with the mood of the wind. Some claimed it floated between realms, tethered only by the breath of its master. Others whispered that it could be found only by those lost at sea, guided not by stars but by whispers. It was there that Aeolus kept the winds not as servants, but as his children, the 8 winds. To each direction the Greeks gave a name, and to each name Aeolus gave breath. Boreas, the howling north wind, cold and brutal, who carved paths through forests and snapped ships like twigs. Notice the fiery south wind, drenched in the fever of storms, bearer of floods and burning skies. Eurus, the wandering east wind, restless and sharp, never still for more than a whisper. Zephyrus, the gentle west wind, who carried spring in his palms and the scent of blooming fields. And 4 more still lesser winds, with voices not yet named by mortal tongue, swirling around their elder kin, like shadows around a flame. They did not obey Aeolus. They trusted him, for he alone understood their rage and rhythm. He was not their master, but their shepherd, the one who whispered to them in forgotten tongues and calmed their fury when the world had not yet earned their wrath. Within his floating palace stood the hall of wind jars, a vast chamber carved from storm-forged stone. Here Aeolus kept massive amphorae sealed with Wakian bronze, each one humming, faintly glowing, slightly pulsing with the energy of a contained storm. Each jar contained a wind coiled waiting, and only Aeolus knew which to release and when. The voyage of Odysseus, of all the stories sung beneath olive trees and carved into temple walls, few speak more clearly of Aeolus than the tale of Odysseus, the war-weary king whose journey home twisted into a tale of sorrow. When Odysseus arrived at Aeolia, tossed and torn by Poseidon's wrath, Aeolus welcomed him not as a beggar, but as a fellow man of burden. The two sat in silence for an entire night before a word was spoken. Odysseus, who had seen the face of war and the wrath of gods, spoke not of glory, but of his longing to return home, to see his wife, his son, his land. Aeolus listened, and in the morning he gave Odysseus a gift, a leather bag, bound with silver cord, sealed with Aeolus's own breath. Within it swirled all the winds, save one Zephyrus, the west wind gentle and true, who would carry Odysseus home. But the gods are not the only ones cursed with pride. Odysseus did not tell his crew what lay in the bag, and as the ship neared Ithaca so close they could see smoke rising from their hearths, curiosity took root. They opened the bag, and in that moment the winds screamed free. They tore at the mast, shredded the sails, and cast the ship back across the sea, yet further from home than ever before. When Odysseus returned to Aeolia, battered and broken, Aeolus turned from him, not in anger, but in sorrow. "The winds do not favor those who cannot carry silence," he said, and the gates of Aeolia closed once more. The test of the windless sea. There is another story, lesser known, whispered only by old sailors, who still leave offerings at the stern. It is said that once in an age between wars, a sea went still, utterly unnaturally still. The waves ceased. The sky hung in absolute silence. Ships floated like ghosts, their sails limp, their crews dying of thirst, though surrounded by water. This was the test of the windless sea, a punishment sent not by Poseidon, but by Aeolus himself. A mortal king, it is said, had dared to demand that the winds obey him. He had built towers to trap the air-chained priests to altars and whispered prayers not in reverence, but command. Aeolus watched, and Aeolus chose silence. For 30 days and nights no wind blew. Birds fell from the sky. Clouds did not move. The sea did not breathe. And in that stillness madness bloomed like mold on rotting wood. Only one ship returned. Its sails were shredded, its crew mute. And on the deck, carved in salt and blood, was a single phrase: "Wind is not a servant, it is a witness." The mortal who loved the wind. There was once a girl nameless now, whose hair was red as autumn leaves, and whose laughter ran faster than the wind. She danced upon cliffs, whispering into the gales, not in prayer, but in conversation. The villagers called her cursed. They said the wind followed her, that birds circled her head, that leaves never touched her skin, that sometimes she vanished for hours and returned with salt on her lips and lightning in her eyes. They feared her, but Aeolus did not, for he had heard her, truly heard her, in the way only wind can. She did not beg. She did not pray. She spoke, and so, on the eve of a great storm, when ships cracked and trees bent to the ground, the villagers huddled in fear, and she stood outside, arms wide, eyes closed. The wind touched her cheek and passed her by. In the morning her house stood untouched. A single feather rested on the windowsill, no bird in sight. From that day on, no storm entered their valley again. They built no temple, they left no statue. But every year on the windiest day of the season, they left bread and wine at the crossroads and whispered her name to the breeze. And the wind, they say, whispered back, "Aeolus endures. The world has changed. Sailors no longer speak to the air. Planes slice the skies, and winds are measured in miles per hour, not myths." But still he remains, when a sudden gust slams a door closed for no reason, when the trees all lean the same way except one, when a ship disappears not in storm but in perfect calm. That is Aeolus, watching, waiting, not as a god of war or wisdom, not as a figure of worship or fear, but as the one who holds the air itself, the breath between words, the space between lightning and thunder. He is not forgotten because he never asked to be remembered, only to be respected. So when next the wind changes direction without warning, stop, listen, and if it speaks, listen longer. Asclepius, the hands that touched death. They say the gods gave mankind many gifts, fire, song, rain, harvest. But only one among them dared to return what had been taken. Only one reached past the gates of death, not to rule, but to restore. That one was Asclepius, the god of healing. And his tale, though veiled in incense and prayer, is one of quiet rebellion of a man who learned to unmake fate itself. Asclepius was not born in thunder or flame. He came into the world by accident, or perhaps by design, more ancient than even Olympus understood. His mother, Coronis, was mortal. A woman of rare beauty, she caught the eye of Apollo, god of light, prophecy, and art. They lay together and she conceived, but in her mortal heart, confusion lingered. She took another lover, a mortal prince. When Apollo learned of her betrayal, it was not he who struck her down, but Artemis, his sister, swift and vengeful. Coronis burned upon the pyre, her belly swollen with unborn life. Yet as the flames rose, Apollo arrived. He stepped into the fire, his hands untouched by its hunger, and from the ashes of betrayal, he pulled forth the child, his son, and named him Asclepius. The boy's first breath was drawn in smoke. Apollo did not raise him in Olympus, for the boy was too fragile, too mortal, too full of potential. Instead, he was given to Chiron, the wise centaur, the same ancient soul who had tutored Heracles, Achilles, and Jason. But Asclepius was unlike any pupil before. He listened in silence. He watched the way leaves curled before sickness. He traced the path of stars not for prophecy but for diagnosis. While others learned war and glory, Asclepius learned the quiet art of repair. He healed animals first, then people, then princes, warriors, kings, and soon the dying. It is said that Athena herself gifted him the blood of Medusa slain by Perseus. From the right side it killed instantly. From the left it brought back the dead. Asclepius kept only the left. With it he revived the breathless. He called names into tombs and heard answers. He placed hands upon still hearts and felt them beat again. And the world, so used to the finality of death, began to change. Men no longer feared battle. Women no longer mourned childbirth. The underworld began to empty. Hades, god of the dead, sat upon a throne built of silence and shadow. He ruled not through cruelty but through balance. Every soul had its place, every ending its purpose, but now they were vanishing. He looked upon his realm and saw empty roads, silent rivers, no procession of spirits, only echoes. And so he rose not to beg but to warn. He spoke to Zeus. The mortal defies us. He unweaves the tapestry, and Zeus high upon Olympus heard. He looked upon Asclepius and saw not a healer, but a threat, not to power, but to order. What is a god of death, if death can be undone? What is fate, if healing becomes resurrection? Zeus gave no warning, as Asclepius knelt beside a dying child, whispering words. Only the sick can hear the sky cracked open, and the thunderbolt fell, not in anger, but in fear. It struck him down where he knelt, turning sand to glass, hope to ash. The people cried out. Temples were flooded in mourning. Even Apollo wept, a god in grief, furious at Olympus. He stormed heaven. He destroyed the Cyclopes who had forged the bolt. He screamed at Zeus not as a son, but as a father. And for the first time in divine memory, Zeus relented. He would not undo the death, but he would honor it. Asclepius, once mortal, once healer, was raised into the heavens, immortal not in form, but in legacy. He became a god not of conquest or thunder, but of hands and herbs and hope. The rod and the serpent, even now his symbol remains the rod entwined with a serpent, misunderstood by many. It is not a weapon. It is a staff of travelers, a healer's cane. And the serpent, it is rebirth, the skin shed, the life renewed. In temples called Asclepeia, the sick would sleep among sacred snakes, hoping for dreams that held cures. Priests of Asclepius, known as therapeutae, listened, observed, and healed with knowledge passed from generation to generation. Healers still carry his mark today, though they may not know his story. But when they lay their hands gently upon a chest, when they whisper reassurance to the suffering, when they choose to heal, not harm, they echo him. They become for a moment his hands. Asclepius never left the gods, no longer walk as they once did. Olympus is quiet, but in the silence of hospital rooms, in the hush of a mother's prayer, in the soft sound of a breath returning after near death, Asclepius is near. He does not call thunder. He does not raise fire. He places a hand on a healer's shoulder and watches the world heal itself. Eris, the apple, the oath, and the war of kings. They say the gods fear chaos, that even Olympus, with its golden halls and gleaming thrones, was built not only on power, but on order. Every god had their place. Every law was carved into sky and stone. But there was one whose very breath unraveled that order. One whose footsteps echoed like broken promises, whose gaze could twist love into resentment and truth into conflict. Her name was Eris, the goddess of strife, discord, and envy. And though her name was spoken in low voices, and her place was not among the honored. It was she, and she alone, who planted the seed that would bloom into the blood-soaked fields of Troy. Eris was not invited to banquets. She was not called to weddings. No libations were poured in her name. For where she walked, Shield's cracked bonds frayed and secrets rose like smoke. She did not mind. She watched and waited. She knew the hearts of gods better than they did, because where pride bloomed, she saw weakness. Where beauty thrived, she saw rivalry. And so when Thetis the sea-nymph was to marry Peleus, a mortal king, the gods gathered in celebration. Zeus himself blessed the union. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite stood radiant beside golden tables. Ambrosia flowed like river mist. Laughter rang through Mount Pelion. But Eris was not invited. No seat, no cup, no glance. And in that silence something ancient stirred. She did not scream. She did not curse. She smiled. And from the folds of her cloak she pulled a single fruit, smooth golden, glowing faintly, as if plucked, not from tree, but from temptation itself. On its skin, a single word burned. To the fairest. She stepped into the feast, not seen, not welcomed, and rolled the apple across the table of the gods. It stopped between Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, and the world changed forever. At first they laughed, a game they thought, a trick, but then eyes narrowed, smiles tightened. Hera, queen of the gods, goddess of marriage, declared it hers, for she was the highest. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, scoffed beauty without intellect, was vanity. And Aphrodite, goddess of love and desire, simply smiled, for she needed no argument. The apple did not choose, so they turned to Zeus. But the king of gods, wise in all matters of wrathful women, refused to judge. Let a mortal decide, he said. And so began the judgment of Paris. Paris, prince of Troy, son of Priam, was a shepherd then, not yet a warrior, not yet a man of legend. He lived in the hills, quiet and beautiful, unaware that the gods were already reaching for him. Hermes appeared first, leading the three goddesses to him. Each stepped forward, not with threats, but with promises. Hera offered power, kingdoms, glory, dominion over all men. Athena offered wisdom, strategy, invincibility in battle, unmatched greatness. Aphrodite said nothing at first. Then she leaned close and whispered, "I will give you the love of the most beautiful woman in the world." And Paris, young and reckless, chose desire. He handed the apple to Aphrodite. That woman, the most beautiful in the world, was Helen, queen of Sparta. But she was already married to Menelaus. Paris sailed to Sparta not as a thief, but as a lover led by divine promise. Helen followed him not as a captive, but as one ensnared by Aphrodite's gift. And when they vanished together, when Troy welcomed them in the golden gates, the Greeks rose in fury. Kings gathered, oaths were summoned, ships filled the sea like locusts. Spears were lifted not for justice but for pride, and war was born. 10 years of blood flame and grief. Heroes fell, cities burned, sons watched fathers die, and gods chose sides, like gamblers in a storm. And all of it, every sword raised, every pyre lit, began with a single apple. Not a curse, not a prophecy, a choice. Given by Eris, goddess of discord, they say she walked the fields of Troy unseen. That in every argument between generals she whispered. That when Hector died, and the Achilles raged, her shadow flickered in their eyes. She did not raise a blade. She did not shout. She nudged, and watched the world tear itself apart. Even now her apple is passed from hand to hand, in politics, in envy, in silent judgment and unspoken resentment. Wherever someone whispers, "Why not me?" Wherever two friends begin to drift not with reason, but with the slow poison of comparison, there she walks, her apple gleaming, still golden, still waiting. Pan, the whispering god, of wild places. Long before temples were raised, before cities echoed with iron and law, there was only earth and wind, and the sound of wild things breathing beneath the trees. In that age before order, before men cut the forests into fields and named every hill and river, there walked a god with goat's legs and a man's smile, ancient, laughing, unpredictable. His name was Pan, and his song still echoes where the world forgets itself. Pan was not born in Olympus. He was born of earth and longing from the union of Hermes, and a wood nymph, who fled at the sight of her own son, for his body bore no crown, no golden aura, only the twisted grace of the forest hooves, instead of feet horns like curling vines, and eyes that gleamed not with wisdom, but with instinct. The gods laughed at first, all but Apollo, who listened, because Pan, the wild one, could play. From the reeds that lined the river, Pan cut his first instrument. He breathed into it, and the air bent to his will, forming a melody so haunting that even Zeus paused to listen. It was not the music of Olympus. It was the sound of loneliness, of desire, unmet, of the wind, chasing its own echo. The gods gave him a place not in the heavens, but in the shadows between civilization and wilderness, where mortals still feared the dark, and there Pan became king of the forgotten. He ran with the satyrs and danced beneath the full moon. He slept in caves, drank from waterfalls, and played his pipes beneath fig trees where lovers kissed and nightmares waited. He had no palace, no army, no ambition, only his music and his presence. For where Pan walked, the natural world bowed, not in reverence, in recognition. He was not a god of storms or war. He did not hold fate or lightning, but he could still the wind with a single note, and beasts came to drink beside him as if he were the oldest tree in the forest. They say that when Echo the nymph cursed to speak only what others said, wasted away into voice and stone, it was Pan who kept her memory alive. Each echo in the hills, each repeated whisper in the mountains was his tribute, not of words, but of remembrance. But Pan, like all wild things, was not gentle. There is a reason his name lives in the word panic. For those who wandered too deep into the woods, who mocked the old ways or whistled at dusk, Pan would awaken, not as a figure, but as a feeling, a sudden rush of dread, a twisting in the gut, the snap of a branch when no one walks nearby. The panic. It was not punishment. It was a reminder that some places are older than fire, and some gods do not forgive forgetting. They say Pan died when the world grew too loud, when cities grew taller than trees, when iron roads broke the backs of hills and smoke replaced mist. One day a traveler claimed to hear a voice on the wind, soft, mournful, tired. Tell them Pan is dead. And the world wept, though most did not know why. But others, the old ones, the ones who still walk barefoot in forests, who light candles to no name, they heard the truth behind the words. Pan did not die. He simply hid, because gods do not die when we stop believing in them. They fade, they sleep, and sometimes they return. Pan now lives in forgotten places, in the silence between leaves, in the last breath of twilight, in the tremble before a thunderstorm. He is in the dream you cannot explain. The sudden joy that makes you laugh for no reason. The fear that stops you mid-step in a forest you thought you knew. He is the reminder that not everything wild must be tamed. That mystery is not meant to be solved, but honored. The last firelight. And so they stand, the five forgotten gods. Hecate with her torch at the crossroads, guiding the lost between life and death. Aeolus whispering through clouds and sails, holding the breath of storm. Asclepius, whose hands defied death, and whose symbol still guards the sick. Eris, whose apples split heaven and set kings ablaze. Pan, who laughs in the woods, and waits in silence for the world to remember him. They are not gone. They are not stories. They are echoes. In the bark of a dog at midnight, in the gust of wind that slams the door, in the dream that heals, in the argument that scars, in the sudden stillness of a forest path, they are still here watching, waiting, and sometimes calling. And when you hear them, don't run. Bow your head, light a candle, and listen. The number of Greek gods is huge, since the ancient Greeks believed in many deities and spirits. Because knowledge of the world was limited in antiquity, the ancients were attributing natural phenomena to higher powers. Gods and goddesses could be found everywhere and defined the lives of the people. The 12 gods of Olympus are the most famous ones and were indeed at the center of the ancient Greek religion. However, there were many more than the 12, and many of them were rulers of the cosmos before the well-known Olympians. Let's start from the beginning and break down the chaotic family tree of the Greek gods. The primordial. Greek gods, Greek mythology starts at the beginning of the world. The Greek gods that existed then were the primordial gods. The famous work of Hesiod, called Theogony, meaning birth of the gods in Greek, presents a complete cosmogony. Natural forces are personified, and the most basic components of the cosmos are gods. According to Hesiod, in the beginning, there was chaos. Chaos was the personification of the absolute nothingness, an immense, dark void from which all of the existence sprang. Out of chaos came Eros, the god of love and procreation. We can see that ancient Greeks considered love as one of the most fundamental powers in the world. Then, Tartarus was born, a dark place like the abyss and the original god of the underworld. Goddess Gaia then followed the personification of earth. Erebus, the god of darkness, and Nyx, the goddess of the night, were also born from chaos. From Gaia came Orea, the god of the mountains, Pontus, the god of the sea, and Uranus, the god of the heavens. The full list of the primordial Greek gods. Aclis, the goddess of the eternal night, the first creature that some say existed even before Chaos himself. According to Hesiod, she is the demon of death. Aether, the god of light, the spark of life for every creature. Etymologically, ether means the highest and purest layer of air. Ion, the god of eternity. He was a ghostly primordial deity who personified the meaning of time. Sometimes he is confused with God, Kronos. In Greek, Ion means century. Although incorporeal, he was also portrayed as a monster with a snake body and 3 heads, 1 human male, 1 bull, and 1 lion. According to a myth, Ion and his companion Ananke, also with a snake body, wrapped themselves around the cosmic egg and broke it to form the sorted universe Earth. Sky, sea. Ananke, the goddess of inevitability, compulsion, and necessity. She was an inevitable divine force. Chaos, the god of the void. He was the beginning of all life. According to most versions of Greek myths, Chaos pre-existed all. Kronos, the god of time, not to be confused with Ion, god of eternity, or Cronus, the Titan that we will meet later. Erebus, the god of darkness and shadow. He symbolizes the silence and the depth of the night, together with his sister, the goddess Nyx. He is usually represented as a winged, dark, and huge being, a duo with Nyx. Eros, the god of love and procreation, not to be confused with Eros, the winged god of desire that we will meet later. Gaia, the goddess of the earth. Mother Earth. She is the mother of all, the primeval mother. At a cosmogenic level, She symbolizes the material side of the universe, whereas chaos symbolizes the space of the universe. Eros symbolizes the driving force that unites everything, giving birth to the rest. Hemera, the goddess of day. Hypnos, the god of sleep and father of Morpheus. Nemesis, the goddess of retribution. Nesoi, the goddesses of islands. Nyx, the goddess of night. She was a sovereign, primordial, and cosmogenic entity respected and feared by most gods. She is the sister of Erebus, the god of darkness and shadow. Oria, the gods of mountains. Pontus, the god of the sea, and father of the sea creatures. Tartarus, the god of the darkest and deepest part of the underworld. The original god of the underworld. The underworld was the place where the wicked are imprisoned and tortured eternally after their death. Thalassa, the goddess of the sea, and consort of god Pontus. Thanatos, the god of death. He is the twin brother of Hypnos, god of sleep, and lives in the dark Tartarus. Uranus, the god of the heavens. He soon became ruler of the world and father of the Titans. The Titan gods. According to Greek mythology and the ancient Greek religion, the Titans were the pre-Olympian gods. Their parents were Gaia, Mother Earth, and Uranus, god of heavens. They had two other species as siblings, born also from the union between Gaia and Uranus. The Hecatoncheires, meaning hundred-handed ones, and the Cyclops, meaning circle-eyed. How did the Titans become rulers of the world? The first Titans were 12, 6 male and 6 female. The youngest one was Cronus. At some point, Uranus decided that he did not like the Cyclops and the Hecatoncheires at all. He considered them too ugly and too powerful, so he imprisoned them in Tartarus, the depths of the underworld. Gaia, the mother of the Cyclops and Hecatoncheires, did not like how Uranus treated her children. She became furious with Uranus and decided to take revenge. She asked her other children, the Titans, to cut Uranus's genitals and overthrow him. The Titans were too afraid to do that, except one, the youngest of the 12, Cronus. When Uranus approached Gaia, Cronus surprised Uranus and cut his genitals with a scythe. Cronus, with his action, had separated Uranus, the heavens, and Gaia, the earth. From the drops of Uranus's blood that fell on Gaia, the Erinyes Furies, the Meliae, and the giants were born. The Erinyes were deities of vengeance. If you broke an oath or wronged someone, they would hunt you forever. The Meliae were nymphs of the trees, beautiful and gentle deities. The giants were creatures of immense strength and very aggressive. With Uranus defeated, Cronus freed his siblings from the dark Tartarus, and the Titans became the new Greek gods. They immediately recognized Cronus as their leader and ruler of the cosmos, and helped him consolidate his power. After becoming the undisputed ruler of the world, Cronus, fearing the power of the Hecatoncheires and the Cyclops, like his father did before him, imprisoned them once again in Tartarus. The full list of the Titans, the first Titans, children of Uranus and Gaia, were 12, 6 males and 6 females. Cronus, the Titan, god of the harvest. Cronus, although the youngest of the first 12 Titans, became the ruler of the world after overthrowing his father, Uranus. He then married his older sister, Rhea. Rhea, the Titan goddess of fertility and generation. She determines the flow of things, and her name literally means the one that flows in Greek. Oceanus, the Titan god of the oceans. He was the eldest son of Uranus and Gaia. His dominion extended in every corner of the earth and all parts of the horizon. Oceanus was the personification of water, and he paired with his sister, the Titaness Tethys. Tethys, the Titan goddess of the rivers and fresh water. She was the wife of Oceanus and the mother of more than 3,000 river gods, rivers personified by the ancient Greeks. the Oceanids nymphs, of springs, streams, and fountains, and the Nephili nymphs of clouds, Hyperion, the Titan god of light. His dazzling light shone in all directions. His name means the one who goes above the earth in Greek. He symbolized eternal splendor. He fell in love with his sister, the Titan goddess Theia. Theia, the Titan goddess of the ether. Theia bore the Titan Hyperion 3 shining children, Helios the sun, Eos the dawn, and Selene the moon. Iapetus, the Titan god of mortal life. He was symbolizing mortality and the mortal lifespan. He fathered the Titans, Atlas, who was responsible for bearing the weight of the heavens on his shoulders, Prometheus, who gifted fire to men, and Epimetheus, who married Pandora, the first mortal woman. Iapetus was also considered the personification of one of the 4 pillars that hold the heavens and the earth apart. He represented the pillar of the west, the other 3 being represented by his brothers Creus, Coeus, and Hyperion. The 4 brothers actively played a role in the dethroning of their father, Uranus. As they were all in the 4 corners of the earth, they held Uranus firmly in place while their brother Cronus castrated him with a sickle. Creus, the Titan god of constellations. His name in Greek means Ram, and it shows his connection with the constellation Aries. Coeus, the Titan god of intellect. He was also considered the embodiment of the celestial axis around which the heavens revolve. He married his sister, Phoebe. Phoebe, the Titan goddess of prophecy and oracular intellect. Phoebe bore the Titan Coeus 2 children, Leto and Asteria. The Titaness Leto later copulated with the Olympian god Zeus and bore the Olympians Artemis and Apollo. Given that Phoebe symbolized prophetic wisdom, just as Coeus represented rational intelligence, the couple may have possibly functioned together as the primal font of all knowledge in the cosmos. Themis, the Titan goddess of divine law and order. She also had the ability to predict the future, and thus she later became one of the oracles in Delphi. Mnemosyne, the Titan goddess of memory. Mnemosyne was generally regarded as the personification of memory and remembrance. Later, Zeus slept with Mnemosyne for 9 consecutive days, eventually leading to the birth of the 9 Muses. In Hesiod's Theogony, the kings and poets were inspired by Mnemosyne and the Muses, thus getting their extraordinary abilities in speech and using powerful words. All the ancient writers appealed to the Muses at the beginning of their work. Homer asks the Muses, both in the Iliad and Odyssey, to help him tell the story in the most proper way, and even until today, the Muses are symbols of inspiration and artistic creation. The Titans represented for the ancients the forces of nature, as well as natural phenomena. These forces ruled the world from the earliest times of creation. Only Themis and Mnemosyne represented more mental states, justice, and memory. During the battle of the gods that followed the so-called Titanomachy, Themis and Mnemosyne were the only 2 of the first Titans that did not side with their siblings in their war against the Olympians, and continued their course alongside the Olympian gods. When Rhea became pregnant with the first child of Cronus, Uranus prophesied that Cronus's children will overthrow him as he overthrew Uranus. When Rhea gave birth to their first child, Hestia, Cronus could not get Uranus' prophecy out of his mind. Overcome with fear and madness and trying to avoid the fate his father had, he swallowed the newborn. The same happened to their next 4 children. Cronus devoured all 5 of his newborns. The only one who survived was the 6th and youngest child, Zeus. Rhea tricked Cronus into eating a rock instead of the baby, and left Zeus to the island of Crete to be raised away from his mad father. Zeus grew older and stronger, and eventually sought to free his siblings, leading to the epic battle between the Titans and the Olympians, who the latter eventually won, thus overthrowing the previous generation of Greek gods. It is worth noting that there were many more Titans than the aforementioned descendants of the first 12, the Olympian gods. The gods of Olympus were the main Greek gods who lived on the top of Mount Olympus. The Olympian gods rose to power by defeating the Titans in the War of the Titans, also called the Titanomachy. They were the children of Cronus and Rhea. Zeus Poseidon, Hera Hestia, and Demeter Hades, and later on Apollo Artemis, Hermes Athena, Hephaestus Aphrodite, and Ares. Over the years, the demigod Dionysus became part of their group on Olympus. It is very common to refer to the Greek pantheon as the 12 Olympian gods. However, the ancient Greeks did not worship specific 12 gods. Instead, there were many more major and lesser, but nonetheless important, gods and others that were worshipped locally. The rule of Zeus was not absolute. To obtain it, Zeus and his kind had to wrestle with the Titans and then with the giants. The battle of the giants was more formidable and lasted more years. The greatest Olympians took part in the battle. The giants were not as immortal as the Titans, but they had tremendous power and a monstrous form. After a long and ferocious war, the Greek gods managed to defeat all giants with the help of Zeus's demigod son, the hero Hercules. The Olympian gods had the same inclinations and the same desires, the same flaws and strengths, as the mortals, even sometimes living in similar conditions. They looked like humans, but they were almost always prettier and stronger than humans. The gods could be transformed as they wished, or teleported to any place they wished to. This was also a motivation for the famous Greek hospitality, which was a very important institution in ancient Greece. The Greeks would always welcome with special joy any foreigner who could, after all, be a god in disguise. As can be seen from many myths, the gods of the Greeks were not indifferent to humans. On the contrary, they often came in contact with them, traveling secretly, transforming themselves into ordinary people, rewarding the good and punishing the unjust. The gods did not find a better way to be happy than to live as humans, but they were freed from two great sufferings of mankind, the fear of deprivation and the fear of death. Indeed, the privilege of the gods is carefree. They never think about illness, old age, death. The nectar, the wine of the gods, and the ambrosia, the divine food of Olympus, ensure beauty, health, and happiness for the immortals. The immortal Greek gods settled on the peak of Olympus. There they built their divine palaces, and from there they looked upon the whole world. The ancient Greek religion is based on wisdom. People admired the gods immensely without envying them. Famous temples were built for them, and famous works of art were inspired by them. The gods reflected the ideals of the ancient Greek people. The full list of the Olympian Greek gods. Zeus was recognized as the father of gods and humans. He regulated the celestial phenomena and defined the laws that govern people. He held the lightning bolt with one hand and the scepter with the other, which had an eagle at the top. He was known as the Lord of Justice. People respected and feared him at the same time. He was taking care of the families, keeping vigil in the home of every mortal, and protecting strangers and passers-by from evil. Zeus's wife was the goddess Hera, to whom he was not always faithful. Greek mythology is full of love stories about Zeus, who liked to transform himself into anything he could think of and mingle with other goddesses or mortals. Demeter. Demeter was the Greek goddess of agriculture and protected the trees, plants, and grains. She was the first to make the earth fruitful and taught people how to grow wheat, barley, and other plants. Demeter is somewhat isolated from the 12 gods in ancient myths, and this is because she is an even more ancient goddess herself. The Greeks received her cult from the Pelasgians, who originally lived in Greece. According to Greek mythology, Demeter's daughter is mentioned as Persephone, who was once abducted by god Hades and became his wife. The most sacred and secret religious rites of ancient Greece, the Eleusinian mysteries, were held in honor of Demeter. Poseidon. Poseidon was one of the 6 children of Cronus and Rhea, and brother of Zeus. He was allotted the kingdom of the sea, but he was also considered the god of horses and earthquakes. This is why he was called the Earth Shaker. He rarely lived on Olympus, preferring the depths of the ocean. He was sitting on a famous chariot, drawn by immortal horses, and holding in his hand the famous trident, forged by the Cyclops. When Poseidon was angry, he plunged the trident into the sea and shook it whole from end to end. The sailors prayed to Poseidon so that he spares them from his wrath. Hades was the brother of Zeus and Poseidon, and the god of the underworld. He was allotted this kingdom when the 3 brothers took a draw to decide who will take each of 3 heavens, sea, and the underworld. He liked to live in the dark and shadowed world of the dead, and was rarely seen on Olympus. This is why, although he is one of the most important gods, some lists do not include him in the 12 Olympians. He was also known as Pluto. Plutos in Greek means wealth. The earth is giving us a lot of treasures, and since Hades' kingdom is underneath it, the ancient Greeks believed that he was the one delivering the wealth to them. They actually preferred to call him Pluto, because the name Hades was another name for the underworld, and they did not like the idea of death. The entrance to the underworld is guarded by a monstrous dog, Hades' favorite pet, the 3-headed Cerberus. In order for your soul to cross the silent river, you need to pay the ferryman Charon to carry you to the other side on his boat. Hera, goddess. Hera was the sister of Zeus, daughter of the Titans Cronus and Rhea, and at the same time, Zeus's wife. Hera symbolized and protected the sacred institution of marriage. She blessed and helped the women in labor. Greek mythology presents Hera as a modest, measured, and faithful woman, but at the same time very jealous. There are almost no myths that refer exclusively to Hera. Her name is almost always associated with the myths about Zeus. However, Hera does not present herself as a goddess, submissive to her sovereign husband. She had a strong female personality, and she was the only one that dared to object to him. Apollo. Apollo and Artemis were siblings twins, actually children of Zeus and Leto, a Titan goddess. According to tradition, the 2 children were born on the island of Delos. Apollo is one of the most important and complex Greek gods. He is the god of light, music, and poetry, healing, and prophecy. He was the one that established the great oracle of Delphi, which was considered the center of the ancient world. He was the teacher of the 9 muses, and when they sang, he accompanied them with his famous lyre. Artemis, Apollo's twin sister, was the goddess of hunting wild animals and the wilderness. She spent her time in the woods, accompanied by the nymphs, hunting with her bow and arrows. She was a virgin goddess and protector of young girls. She was also worshipped as one of the primary goddesses of childbirth and midwifery, relieving the women in labor from diseases. She was sometimes associated with the goddess of the moon, Aphrodite. Aphrodite, the most beautiful among mortals and immortals, was born from the foam of the sea, when Uranus's blood fell on it after his defeat by Cronus. This fact makes her the eldest among the Olympian gods. Her name literally means risen from the foam. Aphrodite was worshipped as the goddess of beauty and passion. She could inspire love in the hearts of men and women. Most myths generally present Aphrodite as a vengeful woman. Aphrodite was worshipped in all parts of Greece, and many priestesses were serving her. According to Greek mythology, she married the god of fire and blacksmiths, Hephaestus, but she was in love with the god of war, Ares, with whom she bared many children, among which the winged god of love, Eros. Ares. Ares, the god of war, was the son of the Greek gods, Zeus and Hera. He was always followed by two of his faithful sons and followers, the gods Deimos and Phobos. Ares was handsome and strong young, and well armed. He loved war and battles, so he was hated by people, and his worship was limited. Only in Sparta he was particularly worshipped, and had a statue dedicated to him. Ares was tried, according to tradition, for his many war crimes in one of Athens' hills, the Areopagus Hill, which later became the seat of the criminal court of ancient Athens. Hephaestus was the god of fire and blacksmiths. He was born ugly, and that is why his mother, the goddess Hera, unable to nourish him, threw him out of Olympus. Since then, he has been limping. Hephaestus fell into the sea, where he was picked up by the Nereids and raised by them. Growing up, he became a famous craftsman and set up his workshop on Mount Etna in Sicily. With his various metals, he made works of art of incomparable beauty. He once made a golden throne and sent it to his mother, Hera. As soon as Hera sat down, invisible chains bound her without anyone being able to untie them. They tried to persuade Hephaestus, but they only succeeded after they got him drunk first. Hephaestus, the god of fire, gave his name to the volcanoes in the Greek language. It was from him that the Titan Prometheus took the fire and gave it to the people. Hephaestus was also the one who built the brass and gold palaces of Olympus. Hermes was the god of wealth, trade, thieves, and travelers. He was also known as the messenger god, being the herald of the Olympians and carrying messages between them. He was the son of Zeus and Maia, daughter of Titan Atlas. He was a clever, inventive, and arrogant god. As soon as he was born, Hermes saw a turtle. He took her shell, placed 7 strings in it, and invented the lyre. He once stole the oxen guarded by god Apollo and locked them in a cave. He wouldn't admit the theft, but in the end he confessed. To avoid punishment, he gifted the lyre to Apollo. Hermes wore winged sandals and held the caduceus, his wand, which had 2 serpents twined around it. He was the one who accompanied the souls of the dead to Hades, and for that he was known as the soul-bearer. Athena. Athena, according to Greek mythology, was the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare. Athena was the beloved daughter of Zeus. Her mother was the Titaness Métis, the first wife of Zeus. Zeus received a prophecy informing him that Métis would give birth to the child who would overthrow his father. To escape the prophecy, Zeus swallowed Métis while she was pregnant in Athena. Later, Zeus began to suffer from headaches and called on Hephaestus to help him. Hephaestus hit the head of Zeus with his hammer, and Athena sprang out in full armor. She is always pictured to be armed, never as a child, always a virgin. She won the battle for the patronage of Athens over Poseidon. The Parthenon in Athens is the most famous temple dedicated to her. Protector of heroes and wisest among the gods, Athena was considered one of the most powerful and important Olympian gods, Dionysus. Although a demigod, Dionysus managed to win the heart of the gods and his place on Mount Olympus. As a god of wine viticulture, ritual madness, and religious ecstasy, he was very beloved among the people and was considered a very important god. He was the son of god Zeus and the mortal Semele. He was the patron god of theater and taught people how to make wine. The Athenians, to honor Dionysus, held a famous celebration characteristic of his merriment. Any use of force was prohibited during such holidays. Goddess Hestia was the goddess of domestic life, home and hearth, the flame that kept a family's home warm. She was the eldest daughter of Cronus and Rhea, and the eldest sister of Zeus. In the middle of the ancient Greeks' home there was an altar in her honor. The women of the house had as a responsibility to keep Hestia's flame burning. The worship of Hestia was connected with the worship of Zeus, who protected the strangers, travelers. Goddess Hestia was the first to invent the construction of houses, taught it to people, and became the protector of family peace and happiness. She was always staying on Mount Olympus, keeping the sacred flame going. Other Greek gods. In addition to the above, there were other lesser gods that people also honored and respected. The Greeks often offered sacrifices to request their help or gain their favor, and built beautiful temples to honor them. Some honorary mentions are Hecate, the goddess of magic and necromancy. She was the one that helped the goddess Demeter in search of her daughter. Dogs were closely associated with her. The ancient Greeks believed that when dogs suddenly barked at night, Hecate was passing by. Aeolus, the god of the winds. He was supervising the 8 wind gods. Each wind direction was personified by ancient Greeks. Asclepius, the god of medicine. He was the son of god Apollo, who taught him the science of medicine. Eris, the goddess of jealousy and discord. She was the one that threw the golden apple at the wedding of Thetis and Peleus, because they did not invite her. Her action was the starting point that would later lead to the epic Trojan War. Pan, the god of wild shepherds and rustic music. He is considered to be one of the oldest Greek gods and was especially beloved among the people. But there are so many other Greek gods. There are, of course, deities who, although great, remained secondary or never exceeded their local character. Eileithyia, goddess of childbirth. The war god. Enyalios and his companion, Enios. Leucothea and Evrinomi mothers and ladies of the sea animals. Lords of the sea animals, by the names Glaucus, Proteus, Nereus, Phorcys, and so many more. Other deities are organized in groups according to their gender and age. The youthful forms are considered more important because they are always in motion, dancing, singing. The Graces, the Muses, the Nereids, the Oceanids are some of the most popular groups of deities. Many of these lesser Greek gods and goddesses are forces of nature. Cities honor their rivers and springs with a special altar or temple personifying them. The cult of the winds and the sun were also very popular. The moon and Eos, the goddess of dawn, also appear in some myths, while the worship of the earth in the traditional religion never stopped existing. The existence of such deities has led to the idea that gods are personifications of natural phenomena and nature itself. The Greeks, for example, considered the rivers gods, children of the great gods. The nymphs could be found in springs and fountains that were considered sacred places. Waters from certain springs were considered fert. Therefore, they were related to the ritual bath of the groom before the wedding. Newborns were thrown into the water of a specific sacred source to be blessed and have a good life.